Okay, so I'll just welcome everyone and then hand it over to Nancy. Generally I'll be quiet during the call I just watched to make sure that people are being admitted. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Elaine Michaud. I work for Arizona State University, and I run FLL, both FLL Explore and FLL Challenge for the state of Arizona. And here's someone I need to admit. And so as you all know, this is a judging training that's being done by Nancy, who is our state head judge advisor for FLL. So I will hand it over to her. And I don't know if you guys can see it, but I put in the chat a link to files where we're keeping all the judging files. So if there's anything you need me to put on there on your behalf, Nancy, just let me know. But that way they even when they're on site, the judges can access files that they may need. Gosh, they're coming, Nancy. What are we?
Nice.
30?
Are we up to 30? That's nice.
This is so great.
We do have a lot of new judges this year, so I'm very, very excited about that.
Wow. Okay.
You may have to repost the link for people who have just come in. I'm not sure if it continues to, like, if they weren't there when you posted it, I'm not sure if they can see it.
That was my right. So when there's new people, it disappears, right? Okay.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Control C.
Well, I just joined and I see that Google Drive link. What you mentioned saying?
So that should take you to a Google Drive that has, if I did it right, judging.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah? Okay.
I can see that. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm sure some of the things that Nancy will be referring to today are in there. And then if there's anything that's missing, we can add it as we have this conversation so that you all have access to those files as you go into your events. All right. Nancy, the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Really appreciate your time, and we really need your help on Saturday. So we're really, really excited. Couple of things. I'm in slideshow mode. Hopefully everyone can see the presentation. I can't see you at this point. So if you have any questions as we're going through this presentation, please just come off of mute and ask the question. I want this to be more of a conversation, right? I want everyone to be comfortable going into Saturday, and I don't want any surprises. So a couple of things. Each of you, when you registered, if you are a first-time judge, you would have been asked to complete some online training. So I've reviewed the online training this year. It was very good. So it did a really good job at explaining the judging process and the judging rubrics. So if you've gone through all of that, that's great. What I'm going to try and do in today's session, I'm not going to go through what they reviewed. I'm going to go through some high level, give you some information, just some tips in terms of what you might want to look for or think about as you go into the sessions that maybe wasn't mentioned in the training itself. So, please come off of mute. If there was something in the training that didn't really make sense to you, then please feel free to ask that question. I want you to feel comfortable with this process. If you've never judged with First LEGO League before, it is so much fun seeing the kids, but it can be overwhelming for the first time because you're going to be receiving all kinds of information at one time, and you're going to be scrambling to write all your notes. So I understand that. Just know that that's the feeling that everyone has. But by the time you get to the end of the sessions, I think you'll feel much more comfortable. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So First LEGO League, for those of you who haven't done this before, these are teams of students between grades 4th grade and 8th grade in the US. They will, so you're going to have some teams that you'll see will have the smaller kids in combination with some of the older kids. They could be all different ages. Couple of things that they will be coming into your room in terms of eligibility. They are only eligible for awards and advancement to state at their first qualifying event. You really don't have to worry about that. We will worry about that on our end. They will compete in 4 different areas at the tournament. 3 of the areas are the areas that you'll be judging. And then the other area is the robot game. So they are building a robot out of Legos, and they're programming that robot to complete certain missions on a very large game board, in which if they do certain tasks, they're going to score some points within a certain period of time. If you get a chance to look at the game for this year, I think it just is helpful if you kind of understand what the game looks like. You don't need to understand it in detail, but it's a frame of reference so that you know what the kids are programming their robots to do. The 3 areas that you'll be judging in are going to be in innovation project, robot design, and core values. So we'll talk about each of those areas through this presentation. In each of your rooms, you should have 3 judges. If we have enough volunteers, you'll have 1 judge assigned to each of those areas. We will have some tournaments where we will be short on judges, which means that you may only have 2 judges in a room and you'll be responsible for more than just 1 area. When the teams come in, they must have at least 2 members, and they cannot exceed 10 members. If a team comes in that is outside of the 2 or 10, just make a note of it on your notes and let your judge advisor know that, and continue with the interview process like you normally would. Okay, you don't need to tell them that, oh my goodness, you don't have enough team members or you have too many. Just make a notation, score them and review them, interview them as you normally would, and then just let your judge advisor know. For first competitions, core values is extremely important. Core values is how we behave at tournaments, but in life, really. It's making sure that we're treating everybody respectfully. We are competing, but we're competing graciously. We're kind to others. So those values are very important. And that extends beyond just the student teams. It extends to the coaches, extends to the parents, right? All of them should be demonstrating core values. We will have volunteers outside of the judging rooms who will also be watching for core values and will let us know if there's any egregious behavior that needs to be notated, and they'll give that information into the judging room. But just so that you know, it's very important that all of the members are displaying good core values. You're going to be assessing that when they're in your judging room as well. Okay. So let's talk about the process. So when the teams arrive, you may or may not have a judge assistant outside of your room. So the judge assistant would be someone who would check in the teams in terms of making sure that the team is there. They'll open the door to your judging room and let you know the team is here. Are you ready to take them? In some tournaments, if they don't have enough judge assistants, you may be the one who's letting the team in. So either way, just make sure that when the time comes that they're supposed to start their judging session, you bring them into the room. Some of them are going to be very excited. They'll have a song, or they may have a chant or a team, thing that they do, and that's fine. Go ahead and let them do that as they come into the room. They're showing their team spirit. In some instances, you're going to have a coach or a mentor ask, can we come into the room? And we are allowing them into the room. My recommendation is only to allow one individual into the room. It could be a coach and or mentor, and seat them behind the team. So Keep in mind that the interview process and what you're assessing is all about the team. And we don't want any distractions from a coach or a mentor. If you have more than one that comes into the room, sometimes they'll talk. Even if they're whispering, it can be distracting. So I want everything to be focused on the team and what they're able to communicate to you. So we want to avoid distractions, but you are allowed to have one in the room. When the team comes in, one of the judges, doesn't matter which one, will just do the team welcome, just welcoming the team into the room, making sure that you have the right team. So always verify the team number and make sure that that's correct. And what I always like to do is to make sure that I go through and just highlight what the process looks like. The team should be aware of it, but I like to remind them of what the process is. So the process would be, you'll have 5 minutes to provide an innovation project presentation. Then we'll go into a Q&A. This reminder is important because you are going to be timing them in each of these areas, right? You only have a short period of time in terms to assess for each area. In total, you'll have 30 minutes. At the end of the 30-minute session, you need to be done and having them exit the room. And we need to be consistent. It would not be fair for you to give one team 35 minutes and another team only 30 minutes. So we have to be consistent and make sure that you're keeping to the 30-minute time allotment. Now, what you see on the screen right now is the recommendation for each of the areas. And your team of judges, it's up to you how you want to do the timing. You could have one person who is the timekeeper and letting each phase know that, hey, time is up. We're going to move on to the next area. Or each of the judges can time their own area. The reason I mentioned that is because for me, I like to time my own area. So if I'm an innovation project judge, I know that I have a total of 10 minutes to assess their project presentation. So sometimes the team will come in and they may do a 5-minute presentation. I'll go into questions. Sometimes if the team is doing a good job and they go a little bit longer, they're going to 6 minutes, but you are getting the information you need in order to assess them per the rubric, then I will let them go the 6 minutes. However, I know that I only have 4 minutes left for questions and answers. So I can't exceed my 10 minutes, okay? So at the end of the Q&A, the innovation project judge will hand over to the robot design. Just let the team know I've asked you all the questions that I need to ask you, and now we're going to go ahead and go into the robot design portion. And so you'll hand it off to the robot design judge. So each judge is responsible for asking questions in their particular area. The robot design judge, when it comes to their area, they need to ask, do you have a presentation? Most teams will have a robot design presentation, which you will want to limit to around the 5-minute time mark. Some of the newer teams will come in and they won't have a presentation, which is fine. They don't need to have a presentation. That means you have 10 minutes for questions and answers, right? So for the newer teams, because they won't be familiar with the presentation, you'll have to ask them all the questions about the robot. Somebody have a question? Okay, so you'll ask them each of the questions, and then at the end of the 10 minutes, you'll go to core values. Now, the core values section is limited to 3 minutes for a reason, because when we get to the core values rubric, you will notice that a lot of the areas are behaviors that you can actually assess during the 20-minute portion of the presentations already. So the team has talked for 20 minutes on innovation project and robot design. So during that 20 minutes, you're going to be able to assess some of their core values. The 3 minutes set aside for Q&A is for those areas that they may not have mentioned or you need more clarifying information. So it gives you a little bit of time to ask some more questions. At the end of the entire process, we end with feedback. So this is a very popular piece with the teams. They like to receive feedback. We used to give them just feedback in written format, and I think sometimes they didn't understand the feedback. So we give it to them in both. We do write it down when we get to the rubrics, but we also give it to them in a verbal format. The way that we give feedback in first is we will highlight something that they did really well, and then we will give them a suggestion for an improvement for next season or their next tournament, because this could be a team that is actually moving on to state, which means that if you give them some feedback for improvement, they could make those improvements before they get to state. So it's very helpful for the team. Okay. Any question on the interview process? So I want to throw this up because I just want everyone to keep in mind that in the judging areas, it's all about the engineering design process. Okay, it's about the process, and we want to understand what the kids are doing, why they chose to do it, and how do they come to make that decision. So that's really the focus of your assessment process. Okay. So let's start with the innovation project. So the innovation project, every season, there is a prompt or a focus that we ask the teams to focus on as they go through their research for their project. So for this year, it's a very broad topic. It's all about the arts. So it's really moving from STEM to STEAM this season. And it's asking them, how do they use technology, because it's always about technology, and the arts to help engage others, to increase participation in what you love to do. And what you love to do could be almost anything, right? I love to play tennis, or I love to crochet. It could be anything, a broad number of topics. And then if you think about the arts in terms of, it could be something on stage, it could be film, it could be music, it could be any of those things that are in the arts. How do they use any of that technology from a technology perspective to help engage an audience, to help encourage you to be interested in what they're trying to convey to you, whether it's, scrapbooking, playing a sport, anything like that. So it's very broad. I'm going to be very interested to see what the kids come up with. But this is what their quote topic and challenge is for this season. So for innovation project, this is what the rubric looks like. The 5 areas, you can see it kind of follows the engineering design process. There are 4 levels of scoring, 1 through 4. They must meet the criteria that's listed in order to be able to give them that level. So if they accomplish everything that we said in the rubric, right, clear definition of a problem, clearly detailed research, then you can give them a 3. There is no 2.5. I know some judges will say, well, they're almost there, but not quite. If they are in between, then that means they are a 2. Or if they're in between here, between 1 and a 2, that means they're a 1. They must meet all of the criteria in order for you to give them that level of scoring. The level 4 is not defined. And what we've found in the past is that there are some teams that just go way above and beyond. It's just a wow piece of, their problem statement or what they've done with their solution. It's just above and beyond, and it's very hard to define. So what we've done now is you will help us to define what that is. So if they are way above what you would expect to see, then you would check a number 4 and you have to tell us what that is. What is it that made them a star or above and beyond? What I would be very surprised to see is a team that gets all 4s. So I will tell you that I have judged at Worlds, which is where all the best of the best teams go to. And I didn't score any of my teams all 4s. So all 4s would be a world-class team. Now, I'm not saying that that won't happen, but I just want to level set everyone to make sure that we score consistently. So what's important is that the judges at each of the tournaments, you score consistently. We don't want to have an easy grader versus another team of judges that is a hard grader. So keep that in mind. And when we get to the deliberation process, we'll talk a little bit about that. That is where the judges will actually have a chance to talk about what they saw in their teams, and that's how we kind of level set. So on the rubric for the innovation project, just a couple of areas just to give you an idea of what a 1 versus a 4 might look like. So you will have some of the teams come in and maybe they've done some research, but they've only done a little bit of research on the web. And they don't really tell you where they went, or maybe they only went to one site. So that would be an example of minimal research. Some of your veteran teams are going to come in, and in their presentation, they're going to show you a list of websites, people that they talk to, even documents that they've referred to, and they're going to pretty much have a list, like a bibliography of everything that they've used in their research, and they will provide that to you. So that is clearly providing you with a detailed list of research material and the sources that they've used. It's not just from one source, it's from a variety of sources. So that's something that you may see. One thing I want to mention in this design piece is this is talking about selecting and planning for a problem. Let me go back actually. Identifying the problem statement. This may be an area you may have to ask the team, what is your problem statement? Sometimes they forget to tell you what their problem statement is. So you might have to go back and clarify. Once they clarify what their problem statement is, they should talk about how did they arrive at that problem statement, right? Did they have a variety of problems that they talked about before they actually selected one problem? So some teams will say, no, we just came up with this one problem and decided that we would research solutions for it. Other teams will, each team member might throw out a problem. So there might be 5 different problems, and then they will go through a team selection process, and they'll describe what that selection process entailed. So that's on the other end where they're actually providing you with, so if you think about it, we want to understand why did they select the problem that they chose? And they will talk about that, okay? Because some of the answers could be, we did some research in each of these areas and we found we couldn't find enough information in this one, so we took it off the table. Or it could be as simple as we took a vote and this was the most interesting one. So those are some of the answers that you might receive. And then we get to the solution. So on Create, this is where they're actually trying to develop a solution to what their problem is. So if the problem is there's not enough interest in water conservation, okay, so how do I get people interested in water conservation, right? That's what I'm interested in. And so they will talk about what is their solution, and did they actually talk about and review as a team multiple possible solutions and then decide on one particular solution after they've gone through an assessment process. So having them describe that for you, or if they actually have it documented in their presentation that they're showing you, is awesome.
Is that
Let's-
still the design area, or is that in creating?
that's in creating.
Okay.
In creating also is actually showing you a copy of what their solution looks like, right? So you want to see what their solution looks like. However, you know, what I've seen in past situations or presentations is you will have a team that actually has implemented and executed a solution. It's live. So if they've created a an app or something and it is live, it's something that's being used, that would be something that would be in Exceeds. That's right. It's above and beyond what a detailed drawing and model would look like. They're actually using something. We get into iterate. This is an area where many teams won't share this, and you'll have to ask them about this. So if you think about them coming up with a problem, coming up with a solution, coming up with an awesome solution, but they don't share it with anybody, it doesn't really help anybody. So the whole process and idea of coming up with a solution is actually to share it with people and to get their feedback. So are you sharing it with people that, in this case, it's broad because any of us could be interested in this. So they could be talking to classmates, they could be presenting their solution to teachers, to professionals. It could be any of those areas. And so you can see how the answers are or, one or the other, or and. Some of your veteran teams will share with a large number of individuals. And when they share it with them, it's one thing to share your solution. It's another thing to ask for feedback. So we're sharing our solution with you. Do you have feedback for us to help us make this better? What improvements can we make? And a team that really goes through the process will show you the improvements that they've made. So they will show you, this is the initial solution that we came up with. We asked for feedback from a professional or from family and friends. This is the improvements that they suggested. We implemented those solutions, so this is what it looked like. Or the answer could be, we heard their feedback. We decided not to implement their feedback because XYZ, right? So we want to understand what is the thought process that this team went through to make decisions, to make changes, or not to make changes. And then the last area is a little bit easier, right? So is the presentation engaging? These teams, when they come in with their innovation projects, they could be doing skits, they could be doing some fun things. If they don't do a fun thing and they just do a presentation, a strictly formal presentation, that's okay as well, as long as it's engaging and you're interested in how they're presenting the information, that's fine as well. And then you're going to assess the solution that they provided to you. The team should talk about, okay, so this is our solution. This is the reason why we think this is a good solution. And this is how it's going to impact others, why others should be interested in our solution, in engaging in our area of interest. Any questions on Innovation Project? So Innovation Project is a fun one to judge, but it's a lot of information that you're assessing in a very short period of time. Now, I know when you went through the judging training, they do provide you, and we will at tournaments, we will provide you with a list of questions that you can ask to help get you started. But what I recommend to my judges, the easiest thing to do is, as you're listening to all of the information, you're taking your notes. Those areas that they didn't touch on, that's where your questions need to be. So as they go through their presentation, if you did not hear anything about them sharing, you need to ask that question because you won't be able to assess their sharing. If you didn't hear a problem statement, you need to ask them, could you please clarify what your problem statement was again? If they didn't talk about how that solution impact others, you need to ask that question. So the questions, I think, will be very easy as you go through and assess, because you're not going to get enough information in some of these areas. You will have potentially a team that just knocks it out of the ballpark and will, because they get a copy of the rubric, they will answer all the questions in their presentation. That is an awesome team. That is a veteran team. And in those cases, you might not have any questions. I've had that in the past where I'm like, I don't have any questions. You've answered everything that I needed to know. And then you can move them on to robot design. Okay. Any questions on innovation project before I move on to robot?
Can I throw something out there real quick?
I'm sorry?
Can I throw something out there real quick about the innovation project?
Sure.
Because I just wanted to say that sometimes it can be hard to come up with feedback. The one I always try to push with really hard is the iterate, because most of them won't cover all those points where they talk to a user and a professional and get the feedback applied to it. But the main thing is they can have something that's really awesome. They can have the best like prototype, but when you start digging around it, it's really easy to get blinded to that because their project won't really relate back to the prompt that they're given. So that's always good to make sure that don't be blinded by the amazing thing they put in front of you. Make sure it does relate back to the prompt too.
Yep, that's a really good point.
So to clarify, if they get done with the with one section and they don't need the 5 minutes for Q&A, can they use that time later on in the judging process to spend more time on something else?
Absolutely. So,
Okay.
you know, maybe robot, you'll get to robot and they need the extra time. So that'll be great, right? Yes. So
Thank you.
you can make it up. You might need it in core values. So that'll be great. Yeah. So we won't cut them short unless you really did get all the information you need in all of the areas and you don't need to go the entire 30 minutes. I have not had that happen before. Typically we go very close to the 30 minutes. Okay, so let's talk about the robot design. So for the judges that will be doing this area, it is very easy for you to get hung up on their cool robot. So to Julie's point about seeing a really great project, same thing with the robot. The robot will come in typically into the room. You'll see the robot and you'll see this really fancy robot. And it's so easy to be like, wow, that is so cool. So remember, for robot design, it's all about the process of how they built that robot and why they built it in that way and how they programmed it. Because if it's a really great robot that gains a lot of points and does all of the missions, they are going to score a lot of points in the game. So they will get points in the game. This robot design judging that you are doing, now we're going to give them points on how did they go about designing this robot. Okay, so keep that in mind as we go through the rubric. Sometimes on the mission strategy, some of your rookie teams won't have a clear mission strategy. They will talk about, you might have to ask them the question, what was your mission strategy? And sometimes their answer will be, well, we did the missions that were the easiest, or that were the closest. Okay, so that's one answer you could get. From another team, what you could get is you could get them, and they will document this, and they will list every single mission, and they will have the assessment for each mission in terms of how much time it takes to do that mission, what type of attachments they would need to do that mission, in what order they want to do that mission. So they will have everything laid out. Now that was way above and beyond. I think I had maybe 1 or 2 teams that did that. So you're not always going to see that. That to me is clearly a 4, where they thought through everything about why they are doing a certain mission and in what order they're doing a mission. So for those of you who haven't seen the game table yet, there are, trying to remember, there may be about 15 different missions that they can run, and they're all over the game table, okay? And the missions require the robot to either push something, pull something, move it, but to do something in order to gain points. And if they do it in a certain way, they could gain more points or less points. So what is their strategy in terms of in what order that they might do missions? Because when a robot goes out to do a mission and then it comes back to home base, that is when the student can actually change the program, right? If the robot is stuck out on the game table and they pick up the robot and bring it back to the home base, they lose points. So it's in their best interest to make sure that they program a robot to go out and come back in. But when they go out, if it can do 3 missions and then come back, then that's probably going to be more time efficient because they only have a certain period of time to run missions. So that's why it's important to understand. So why did you do it in that order? Why did you do those missions? Understanding their strategy. This next one talks about the building and coding skills. So some of the larger teams may not have all their students doing both. They may segment where some people are doing building the robot, some are coding. What we like to see is all team members know how to do both and can talk about both. So that may be an area where you can give feedback if you know that not all team members are doing both. One of the things I forgot to mention is that one of the things in FIRST, we want the students to do the work. Okay, so the students need to do the programming, they need to be building the robot, they need to be doing the research and the innovation project, they need to be doing everything. The coach can obviously coach them and mentor them and help them out, but they shouldn't be doing the work. If, as you're going through the presentations, you think that this is too hard, I can't believe that a student of this age would be able to know how to do that. We always assume that the students are doing the work unless you can prove that they did not do the work. And the way that you prove that is asking them questions. So if they present something and you're like, I wonder if they really understand that, you ask them a question. How does that light sensor work? How did you program it to do what it's doing? And if they can't answer the question, then you know that maybe somebody else did the work. The other thing I'll tell you, the kids at this level, they are very honest. So I have had students come in and they will say, yeah, you know what? Our coach programmed the robot last night. They're very honest. So you have to make a note of that. So that means the students didn't do the work. Let's go on to some of the other areas. Okay, so attachments, sensor functionality. So one of the things that we like to understand is we like to see the process that the kids went through in terms of designing their robot or designing their project. The best teams will document their iteration process, right? They will show you a picture of, this is what our original attachment looked like. This is the second version of it. And then this is the final version, as an example. And they are able to explain to you the reasons why they changed the attachment, what they changed to get to their final attachment. It could be as easy, we changed it because the first attachment was inconsistent or it fell off. And so we kept modifying it, and that's great. So this is a a particular area where I always give feedback because not everyone provides documentation. And if you want a team to get better and improve, it's always good to provide documentation. So this is an area where you might give feedback. We do ask the teams to bring in a copy of their programming so that you can see what their programming looks like and they can explain it to you. They don't always do that to you, but even if they don't bring in a copy of it, they should be able to explain how their code works, how it's making the robot do what it's doing. So if they don't talk about that, then you need to ask them a question about that area. Another area where they're not very good at presenting this, and you might have to ask a question, is about their testing process, right? So what's the testing process that they went to make sure that the robot runs are pretty consistent, that the programming is working consistently? Could be as easy as trial and error, or it could be as sophisticated as we document 10 different runs, and if each of them passes, then we sign off on it, and they're able to actually show you the log that they're showing. So before they actually finalize whatever their code is, or their robot attachment, or their robot itself. So that just gives you an idea of the range that you might see in the testing process. Any questions on robot design? Sometimes when the kids come in, what they're going to talk about is they're very excited about showing you the robot and showing you the attachments. And that's great, but you need to understand, how does that attachment work? How did they decide to create that attachment? Why they went that way? So a little bit more time sometimes is needed in the robot area, because they're talking a lot about, hey, this is my cool attachment. It's great. It will do all of these things, but it doesn't give you enough information to answer some of these questions yet.
Hey, Nancy,
Any
just
questions?
a quick question. Are you just sharing the rubric slide? Or are you actually going through different slides here? Because I only seeing the rubric slide.
I'm on the robot design rubric.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about core values, if there's no questions on the robot. So the core values, it's also about their process. We're really trying to understand how they solve problems, what they're doing in the community to share their FLL experience, how they collaborate with each other, and really just having fun and in competition with others, and just making sure that it's a friendly competition day. So here's what the core values rubric looks like. It is different, looks different from the other two areas, because these are the 6 areas that we're assessing them from a core values perspective. So on core values, when we talk about discovery and exploring new skills and ideas, you're going to hear about the things that they learned to come up with their project. You're going to hear in the robot design piece, you may hear about, well, you know what? This season, our team decided to use Python for programming, and it was new to us. So all of us had to learn that. So those are some of the things that you're going to be looking for. And you can still ask them a question on this area if you didn't get enough. What are some of the other areas that your team learned this season? Because some of the things may not be in the robot or innovation project. It could be that they learned how to be a better team. So I have had teams that come in, they go, yeah, you know what, this is our 2nd season. We didn't work well as a team last year, so we really focused on trying to make sure that we were a good team and really worked on our team building. And these are some of the things that we did to build our team. Or we really tried to make sure that our communication was better this year, right? So it could be any of those areas. What are some of the things that your team learned this year? Is a question I usually like to ask in core values. For innovation, so this is not how great was their innovation project. Okay, so the innovation project judge is already assessing their innovation project. Innovation from a core values perspective is, how did they solve problems? So a question here that I'd like to ask is, did your team run into any challenges this year? And how did you resolve that problem? So what was the team process in resolving an issue? Whether it's we couldn't come up with a consensus on what project we wanted to focus on, or we couldn't figure out how to create a specific attachment, or we had disagreements, or it could be like we had a huge issue. All of a sudden, somebody dropped our robot and the robot broke, and we had to fix and come up with a robot in a day. Or we've had situations where, our room that we use, we got kicked out of the room. We had to find another area to work on our project. So, okay, so that's a big problem that came up. What did your team do to overcome that problem? How did you resolve that? That's what we're looking at for innovation. For impact, a lot of teams won't tell you this, so you will have to ask a question on this. Everything that they're learning in FLL, right, in terms of being a good team member, working on the robot and the process that they go through, all of those things that they're learning, how are they actually sharing that with others, right? You'll have teams that will go out and they'll do community involvement, and that's great. You'll have teams that will actually set up a booth at a particular fair or something, and they will talk about First Lego League and share what their project is, share their robot. It could be as simple as sharing even at their school, but sharing what they learned in First Lego League with others. How do they do that? What are they doing? Inclusion. So this is something that you're going to be able to assess while they're going through their presentations. How do they actually respect each other? So these two kind of go very closely together, inclusion and teamwork, working well as a team. You will have some teams that come in and they will talk over each other. They won't take turns. You'll have other teams that are very, very good at making sure that everybody has a voice. You will see some teams that there will be some shy individuals. Some kids will not want to say anything. And I can respect that. They're very shy. That's maybe the first time they've ever been in front of judges. So just keep in mind, you are very scary to these kids. So smile, try to put them at ease, but they are very scared of you. So anything you can do to put them at ease is greatly appreciated. But what may happen is some kids won't speak up, and a really good team will make sure that they include everyone. So you'll have somebody say, so Nancy, why don't you answer this question? Or why don't you tell them a little bit about the program that you did on this attachment? Because they know that this person actually did that. So those are some of the things that you're going to see, right? How does the team work with each other or not work with each other? And they will talk about this sometimes, right? They'll talk about the disagreements that they might have had. And that's fine. How do they overcome that? Let's talk about what are the differences? Why were there differences, and how did you overcome that? The last one is fun. There aren't many teams that I don't give them a 3 for fun. The team should talk about what they did as a team to have fun, to celebrate their successes. If the team is nervous, this is the question I ask them. So what did your team do for fun? And they will instantly be themselves, and they'll talk about, we had pizza parties together so that we could have fun. We all went out and went bowling together, or so they'll talk about how great their team was and the fun that they had. So I typically will give a 3. I haven't had very many situations where I've had to give a team 2, but you may have a team that comes in and you can clearly see that they're not having fun. So I've had that instance as well, but most teams are pretty good when they come in. And they'll talk about how fun they had as a group. Okay. So just a couple of tips. Make sure that you look at the rubric, make sure you follow the rubric. I want you to assess and be very consistent in terms of making your ratings, okay? One thing that we always like to see is that all team members are involved in the presentation. However, you may have situations where you might have a primary speaker or a primary couple of individuals who are speakers in the presentation. Hopefully what you'll see in the Q&A is that all of them are answering questions. So if they don't all ask questions, you may want to ask a certain team member a question. What I don't want you to do is put them on the spot and make them sweat, right? So if they can't answer the question, then just go on to another individual. But we like to make sure that all team members are involved. Good time management, I talked about that. It's very important that you start and end on time. For most of the tournaments, you will have about 10 to 15 minutes in between your interview sessions. It seems like a lot of time. It will not be enough time as you're filling out your rubrics. You will always need more time, but do the best that you can. Take good notes so that you can go back and fill in your rubrics if you run out of time and you got to go into your next interview. The notes are important because when we get to the deliberation process, you're going to have to talk about your teams. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to go through your interview process. All of those scores will go into an online system. One team member from each judging team will be responsible for entering the information into the system. The system is set up that only one individual can enter the information, and that's why it's set up that way. So whoever you elect as your data entry person, you will tell them, if you're the robot design person and maybe it's the core values person who's entering the information, you will tell them the scores. They will go ahead and enter it into the system. They will also type in what your feedback is. So remember, you're going to tell them one thing that they did great and one thing that they can improve on. So they'll go through and do all of that. All of that information goes electronically to your judge advisor. Each tournament will have a judge advisor. I am the judge advisor for the Chandler event this upcoming weekend. The other tournaments will have their judge advisors who are all awesome people. So they will follow the same process that I'm talking to you about. They will gather all that information. So when you're finished with all your judging sessions, you will all come back into one room where all the judges will be. And the judge advisor will throw up on the screen the scores that you have provided them. One other piece of scoring that also will be included with your scoring is what we call GP or gracious professionalism scores that will come from the referees at the game table. So remember I said that friendly competition, being kind to the other teams is very important in our core values. That's where we measure gracious professionalism as well. And the best people to see how teams are interfacing at the game table are the referees. So at the game table is where we probably see the team at their most natural state, because they're under pressure to get their robot to work. And so this is where you're going to see teams really work well with each other or argue and not do really well with each other. So referees are scoring them on that that information will also come into the judge advisor and will be added to the core values scores that the core value judge enters. All of that information is entered into the scoring system. It's going to show up a total score. It'll rank all the teams from highest to lowest in each of the different categories. So we will give a trophy to a overall winner, which means that they are very good at all the different areas. Their robot did really well in the game. They scored highly on core values, innovation project, and robot design. It doesn't mean that they scored number one across the board, but they did well in all categories. And so your judge advisor will share that information with you. So we go off of those scores, but we also go off of feedback from judges. Here's where we level set. Because the scores could be a little bit skewed, because we could have some judges who score a little bit easier than others, this is our chance to level set. And so if you see a team, if you know you saw a team that was awesome, but you see that they're kind of a little bit lower, or maybe they are one of the top two teams, we want to make sure that we decide which team is going to receive that award. The judge advisor will ask the judges, can you describe what their project was? Can you describe what their core values look like? So that's why it's important for you to have notes so that you can go back and provide that information to all of the judges who did not see that team. So you are the advocate for the teams that you saw. Couple of tips, because if you're going to see 5 to 6 teams, I guarantee you will forget what the first team looked like. It's just after all of that time, you're going to forget the information. So what I always do when I'm taking my notes, I always write down the number of team members there are on that team. I write down what their t-shirt looked like. So a lot of teams will come in with team t-shirts. So I will write down it's a red t-shirt. Or I'll write down that they all came in a costume, because sometimes they'll come in a costume for their innovation project. So I will write that down. I'll also write down some things that unique to the team. In other words, if it's an all-girl team, so if it's an all-girl team, I will write like all-girl team. If it's a rookie team, I suggest that you do ask that question, are you a first-year team? And then write down for rookie, if they are a rookie. And the reason I tell you to ask that question is because in the core values area, there are a couple of other trophies that we can, awards that we can provide depending on your tournament, and your judge advisor at that tournament will let you know if you are awarding those awards and what the criteria will be. So in those awards, sometimes it's good to know if they're a rookie team or if they're a veteran team. Okay. Questions?
Yeah, hi, I have a question. Do we need to bring anything with us, copies of the rubrics, laptops to be able to transfer it electronically and so forth?
No, really good question. So your tournament should provide all of that. So you don't need to bring anything, you just need to bring yourself. What other questions do we have?
I have a question about the innovation project scoring.
Mhm.
So there's 2 categories in or 2 subcategories in each category. Are those separate, or you just put a 4 for both of them?
No, very good question. So they're both separate scoring. So you could score the top one as a 3 and the bottom one as a 2. So they're separate.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep, that's a good question. You know, and I forgot to mention, so in the rooms, you can take pictures of the robot, but please don't take pictures of the team. Now, when the team comes in, some of the teams may be bringing in a team information sheet, and on that team information sheet might have their picture, and it might have their picture of their robot and stuff like that. So that's a good reminder. But some teams may forget to do that, and they won't do that. So in those instances, if the robot design judge wants to take a picture of the robot, they can do that, but just don't take a picture of the team. Okay.
Nancy, so you mentioned the team information sheet. I think every year there will be a lot of different versions online. I don't know if we wanted to unify the format, but also it's not required in the regional, right? But it's good to have.
Yeah, it's not required. It's good to have. I think Elaine sent out one standard version. So
that would be great.
Yeah. But you know, if they come in a little bit different, it's the team information sheet, so it's not really a big deal.
Okay.
What other questions do you have? Because I know we're at time, so I don't want to take you over, but I want to make sure that you have all the information you need.
In the past, since you have at least 3 judges in the room, right? In the same room. So when they're doing project presentation, robot design, other judge can also ask questions, right? It's not just one judge that asks questions.
So here's the thing. So the primary judge for that particular area should be asking all the questions.
Mm-hmm.
I have had instances where you're right, some of the other judges could ask questions, but what happens is if the primary judge who is assessing that team doesn't get all the answers and the other judges are just asking questions, it doesn't become efficient. So I recommend that the primary judge ask all the questions. Okay, because they need to get the information to make their assessment.
Nancy, except that I would say sometimes you get stuck. You don't know what to ask next, and there's 2 minutes left. When I'm in that situation, once I've asked all my questions and there's time left, I just go, so anybody else have some questions on robot design? And then your fellow judges know that you're looking for them to help, right? But sometimes,
and that's okay.
Yeah, which is perfectly okay, which is perfect. At Worlds, we do this all the time, because we just help each other out. We have 45 minutes at Worlds, so we have lots of time. So that's okay. But sometimes when you're the primary judge, you're going somewhere with your questions. So if you get interrupted, you never get to the point of what you're trying to get to. If you want, another thing would be to ask, is it okay to ask your fellow judge, is it okay for me to jump in here if I have, and then you could say, hang on, let me ask one more question, and then you can go ahead, right? So it's okay to have that kind of a communication, so long as the primary judge is able to get to all the points that they need to get to in order to fill that rubric, because ultimately they're responsible for that rubric.
Yeah, and so what I've had happen in the past is that I've had new judges and they're all asking questions and none of the answers are getting answered. So that's why if the primary judge allows you to ask questions, that's fine, but please make sure that they get their questions answered first. Okay.
One last question. On the coach or mentor that's allowed in the room, they are not supposed to be talking at all, I'm assuming.
That's correct.
And they will know that ahead of time, or do we need to remind them?
Now, what you will do is if somebody wants to come in, that's fine. You'll say, that's fine. You may come in and you sit down and let them know, just remind them, you are not to speak. I have had a coach come in and they said something and I've had to remind them several times not to say anything. So a gentle reminder at the beginning is always good. For the most part, coaches know the right protocol. But I've had 1 or 2 times that it has happened.
Yeah, I'll ask the tournament directors. There's always a coaches meeting at the beginning of the day, and I'll have either the tournament directors themselves, or it can. When I was judge advisor, I would say how many people, depending on the venue, I would change the number of people, how many people are allowed in the room, and I would tell them, like, I was not kidding. I see one eyebrow go up, and if you think you're communicating with the kids, I will politely ask you to leave. And I did it one time. So I will put a note together to ask the tournament directors to address that, because I don't want to put you guys in a bad situation. Okay, I will do that too.
Yeah, and you know what, to that point, if there's anything that comes up in your judging session that they say or they do that you're like, well, that's kind of questionable, don't bring it up with the team. You make a note of it and you let your judge advisor know, and the judge advisor will handle it. Okay. So your job is not to question whether they're doing something wrong. Okay. Let your judge advisor know, just make a note, and then just continue on with the interview. Okay. Other questions?
I have a question. Are we provided like with little post-it notes so that we can make our little notes that we can attach to the rubrics, you know, something that pops out or something that stands out? I know we're making notes of them, but are we going to put them on little post-its, or are we writing it on those rubric sheets that are being provided?
So I've seen people do it two ways, right? On the rubric sheets, people write their notes. For me, that's not enough room. So I usually use scratch paper and I write my notes on a scratch paper. So at your tournaments, you should be receiving paper copy of the rubric and you should be receiving scratch paper.
Got
Okay. So people take notes differently. So that's why we do it that way.
Works for me.
What else? Does everyone feel comfortable and ready to go? Because this is going to be it'll be a long day, but it'll be a lot of fun. I think you guys will enjoy it. And hopefully, especially if you're not affiliated with an FLL team, I would, and you enjoy yourself, please think about signing up for our state tournament in January, because I need judges.
When is the
All
January?
right.
When is the January?
It's on the Saturday before Martin Luther King. So I think it's like the 13th. So my email address, I think, is, you might have it. It's also on the FLL website. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Send me a question. I'm happy to answer it for you. And, I'll just say this. I always like feedback. So if you go through the judging process, you have some good feedback or you have some suggestions for improvements, send me that. I'm happy to receive feedback. I always want to improve the process. I want your experience to be a fun and enjoyable experience. And if it's not, then I want to know why. Okay. All right, if there's no questions, I'll let you go. Have a great evening. Thank you so much for volunteering. We really, really appreciate it. And hopefully I'll be out there and I'll see you at one of these tournaments.